Hello everyone, you're watching my economics and politics briefing. Today's topic is one of those too important to be discussed subjects, which is always a funny category because it means the topic is real and the people in charge are scared of it. In the last couple of weeks, the global conversation shifted. Not officially, of course. Officially, everyone is still living in the old world, where everything is rules, values, partnerships, and the same tired PowerPoint templates. But under the surface, a new logic is being introduced, a more transactional geopolitical model. Less beautiful speeches, more hard interests. Less fantasy about universal order, more talk about corridors, leverage, dependency, and what you can actually enforce. And that raises the questions nobody wants to touch. What is political sovereignty in the new conditions? What is economic sovereignty? What kind of economic model works when globalization is no longer the default setting? What surprised me is this. These questions are barely discussed, not only in Russia, but also in Western Europe and even in the United States. You'd think people would be obsessed with it. They aren't, because abandoning a worldview is psychologically painful. If you grew up in one climate, you don't easily describe life in another climate. If you grew up inside the Euro-Atlantic paradigm, you struggle to even imagine a world where that paradigm is not the center of gravity. And that's exactly the problem. 1. The mental trap. People keep using old maps in a new terrain. Most elites in the West were trained in a single story. Global markets expand. Democracy spreads. Institutions rule. And whoever controls finance controls reality. Russia, too, spent decades trying to integrate into that story, then got a very blunt reminder that integration is conditional, and the conditions can change overnight. Now, the terrain is changing again. Not in theory, in practice. Supply chains, technology access, capital flows, energy markets, shipping routes. Everything is becoming politicized. So if you're still running the old mental software, you will misread everything. You will look at a deal and search for values. You will look at a pressure campaign and call it miscommunication. You will look at a strategic corridor and call it free trade. That's how systems fail, not because they lack resources, but because they misinterpret reality. 2. Sovereignty. Stop treating it like poetry. Let's define sovereignty without romantic nonsense. Political sovereignty is the ability to make core decisions and enforce them. Economic sovereignty is the ability to keep your society functioning while making those decisions, without being strangled by external finance, external technology, or internal sabotage. So sovereignty is not a statement, it's not a speech, it's a capability. And now we get to the philosophical layer, because it matters more than people admit. 3. The key concept. Societies are idea-material systems. We all understand a whole system, like a car. If you remove the engine, the car doesn't move. If you remove the transmission, it doesn't move. If you remove the wheels, good luck. That's a material system. But there are systems where part of the system is material and part is not. I'll call them idea-material systems. A perfect example is a computer. You can buy the newest hardware in the world. Perfect components, everything installed. And it will do absolutely nothing until you install an operating system and software. That software layer is not something you can hold in your hand, but without it, the system is dead. Now apply this to humans. A human being without language is like hardware without an operating system. Language is the basic layer that allows everything else to run. After language, you can install programs, engineering, music, law, tactics, whatever. Take two genetically similar people. Put one in a high-tech society, put the other in a tribal environment. You don't get two identical outcomes. You get two different systems because the software layer is different. Now scale this to society. A society is also an idea-material system. It has material reality, territory, people, resources, factories, infrastructure. And it has an idea layer, legitimacy, ideology, institutions, incentives, beliefs about what is normal, what is fair, what is possible. Change the idea layer, and you get a different country, even if the material base is similar. Russia is a textbook example. Pre-1917, monarchy, church legitimacy, imperial structure. Post-1917, Marxist legitimacy, party governance, a different economic logic. Post-1991, market absolutism, invisible hand, imported institutional design. Same geography, same people in many cases, different software, different behavior, different results. So when we talk about sovereignty, we are not only talking about oil or tanks. We are talking about what software the society is running. 4. The wrong software problem and why it breaks systems. What happens if software has a bug? The system behaves incorrectly. It calculates incorrectly. It controls incorrectly. What happens if you install software designed for one environment into a completely different environment? You get dysfunction. Here's the ugly argument in the transcript you gave me, translated into clean logic. Russia didn't just choose the market in the 1990s. Russia installed an imported framework of institutions and incentives, many of which were designed for countries that were expected to remain dependent. Export raw materials, import finished goods, export capital, rely on external validation. And even if you argue that some market reforms were needed, the deeper point stands. The incentives were built to extract and export, not to develop and build. Then the terrain changed. The old global system became hostile, fragmented, security-driven. So now you have questionable software and a rapidly changing external environment. That's how you hit the mountain. You're not dead, but you're damaged. You're improvising, and the old autopilot is useless. 5. Why mainstream economics fails. It studies the stomach without the body. This is where the transcript gets sharp, and it's correct. Modern mainstream economics often behaves like a formal game detached from reality. It uses words like demand, inflation, productivity, investment. But it treats them like symbols in a model, not like living forces in a society. Studying the economy separately from society is like studying a stomach separately from the organism. You can do it on paper, you can publish it, but you will not understand how the organism actually survives. You see it in the simplest question that destroys half of modern economic modeling. Where does demand come from? If you increase credit to one part of the system, what happens to households? What happens to wages? What happens to expectations? What happens to demographics? What happens to risk premiums? What happens to the structure of imports and exports? If your model doesn't answer that, your model is theater, and yes, official statistics can be adjusted, reframed, methodologically updated until they become a product, not measurement. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's a system function, legitimacy management. 6. Why a new paradigm is required. Not just policy, but thinking. If sovereignty is a system capability, then you need a system-level way of thinking. That's why the transcript talks about Alexander Bogdanov and techtology. Call it whatever you want. The useful idea is this. You need an intellectual toolset that integrates economics, sociology, psychology, institutions, governance, technology constraints, and power. Otherwise, you get people with spreadsheets who can't explain why the real world refuses to follow their formulas. And here's the brutal part. Building a new paradigm requires a certain personality type. A young researcher, a young analyst, has to have the nerve to say, you don't understand what you're looking at. Not as an ego trip, as a survival requirement. Because if you accept the old language and the old models, you will rebuild the same failure with new branding. 7. The practical path, efficiency, ownership, and the collective subject. Now we move from philosophy to engineering. You want to raise economic efficiency. For decades, people were told, state enterprises are inefficient, private enterprises are efficient. That statement is not a law of nature. It's propaganda dressed as science. Some sectors are better suited to state scale. Heavy industry, strategic infrastructure, foundational production. Some sectors are better suited to flexible private competition, consumer services, niche innovation, fast adaptation. But there is a third form that matters if you care about sovereignty. Cooperatives, employee ownership, producer associations. Why? Because they create something very specific, a collective subject. A form of collective intelligence that can manage complexity better than one isolated owner or one isolated manager. We already know this is real. Science itself is collective intelligence. One person invents theory, another builds instruments, another tests it. None of them alone can do the whole system. A cooperative, when designed properly, can do the same inside production. People share visibility. Information spreads faster. Corruption becomes harder. Decision quality rises. Commitment increases because the people are owners, not disposable labor. Modern technology can amplify this. Transparent accounting, internal audit trails, distributed reporting. You don't need buzzwords. You need visibility and control. But there's a catch. 8. The predator rule. Every efficient system gets attacked. This part is crucial, and it's painfully true. The moment you build an efficient structure, something will try to extract value from it. A corrupt administrator, a bureaucratic parasite, a hostile competitor, a political raider, or an external actor working through internal agents. If the system has no protection, it will be looted. So any sovereignty agenda must include not only better production forms, but defense mechanisms, legal shielding, enforcement capacity, institutional support, a state that can say, hands off, this is strategic. Without protection, the best designs get destroyed first, because they are the richest targets. 9. The missing foundation, local self-governance and ownership psychology. Now we hit the psychological layer. If you want national sovereignty, people must feel the country is theirs. Not abstractly, practically. And that feeling is trained at the local level, managing local budgets, local infrastructure, local priorities, local accountability. When people practice real self-governance, they start thinking like owners. When they think like owners, they invest effort, tolerate hardship, defend the system, plan long-term. Without that, the population behaves like tenants. Adapt individually, extract what you can, disengage, exit mentally or physically. And then, you cannot mobilize society for a sovereign model, because society doesn't believe it owns the state. So yes, local governance looks boring, but it's how you train sovereignty in the population. 10. What the new sovereignty agenda actually looks like. Let's translate all this into practical direction. If you want economic sovereignty in a world of pressure, fragmentation, and changing alliances, you need a reality-based economics, integrated with society, not detached math. Institutional design that rewards production, reinvestment, and competence, not rent extraction. Production models that create collective intelligence, cooperatives, employee ownership, mixed forms. Protection mechanisms so your efficient systems don't get raided. Local self-governance to create ownership psychology, which is the human fuel of sovereignty. A national future plan that is clear enough for people to align with it. And this is the real definition of power, by the way. Power is the ability to imagine a desired future and to implement it. If society cannot imagine a shared future, it becomes an object, not a subject. Someone else writes the plan, and you just negotiate the terms. Final, the reset is not optional, it's already happening. So here's the closing point. The world is changing the operating system, not politely, not with consensus, because nobody gets consensus during systemic transitions. The United States is becoming more transactional. Europe is trying to do rearmament and economic transformation while pretending budgets are infinite. Russia is trying to survive pressure while rebuilding internal capability and rewriting the incentives installed in the 1990s. Everyone is rewriting software mid-crisis, and the winners will not be the ones with the loudest speeches. They will be the ones who can build resilient institutions, productive capacity, social cohesion, and decision-making competence under stress. Sovereignty is not a flag. It's an operating system. Thanks for watching. If you want more briefings like this, subscribe. And send this to the one friend who still thinks geopolitics is about morality plays instead of budgets, logistics, and power.